In the dead of night, when the moon hung like a silver coin in the sky, Nina found herself alone in her detached house. The soft glow of lamplight danced across the walls of her living room as she sat nestled in a cozy armchair, a mug of steaming coffee in hand. With each sip, the bitter taste of the brew mingled with the sweet scent of anticipation, soothing Nina's nerves as she lost herself in the pages of her poetry book. The rhythmic scratching of her pen against the paper filled the room, a comforting counterpoint to the silence of the night. But as the clock struck midnight, a sudden noise shattered the tranquility, a series of clatters and thuds emanating from the upper floors of the house. Nina's heart skipped a beat, her senses on high alert as she strained to listen. Was it just the house settling, or something more sinister lurking in the darkness? With trembling hands, Nina set aside her book and rose from her seat, her pulse quickening with each step towards the staircase. Every creak of the floorboards seemed to echo through the empty house, amplifying the sense of dread that gnawed at Nina's insides. At the top of the stairs, she hesitated, her hand hovering over the doorknob to her bedroom. The air was heavy with anticipation, thick with the promise of danger lurking just beyond. With a deep breath, Nina pushed open the door and stepped into the darkness of her bedroom. Moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting eerie shadows across the room, and there, in the corner, she saw it. A figure lurking in the shadows, its presence ominous and foreboding. A scream caught in Nina's throat as she stumbled backwards, her heart pounding in her chest like a drumbeat of impending doom. She turned to flee, but before she could make her escape, a hand closed around her wrist, pulling her back into the darkness. Panic surged through Nina as she struggled against her unseen assailant, her mind racing with fear and confusion. With every ounce of strength she possessed, she fought to break free, to escape the clutches of her would-be killer. But as the struggle ensued, a voice pierced the darkness, a familiar voice, filled with concern and urgency. It was Nina's friend, calling out to her from the safety of the outside world. With a surge of hope, Nina reached for her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed her friend's number. "Help me," she pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper as she recounted the terrifying events unfolding within the walls of her own home. On the other end of the line, Nina's friend listened in horror, her heart pounding in her chest as she struggled to comprehend the gravity of the situation. "Stay calm," she urged, her voice shaky but determined. "I'm calling the police. Hang on, Nina. Help is on the way." Relief washed over Nina like a tidal wave as she clung to the lifeline offered by her friend's words. But even as she waited for help to arrive, the sense of danger lingered, a palpable presence that seemed to seep into every corner of the house. Minutes stretched into hours as Nina huddled in fear, her eyes darting anxiously around the room. Every shadow seemed to conceal a threat, every creak of the floorboards a harbinger of impending doom. And then, just when it seemed as though the nightmare would never end, the sound of approaching sirens cut through the silence like a beacon of hope. With a sense of relief, Nina rushed to the window, her heart soaring as she saw the flashing lights of the police cars pulling up outside. But as she moved to open the door, a sudden chill ran down her spine, a sense of unease that stopped her in her tracks. And then, without warning, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the house into darkness once more. Panic seized Nina as she fumbled for her phone, her fingers trembling as she tried to illuminate the room with its feeble glow. But before she could make a move, a hand closed around her throat, cutting off her scream as darkness consumed her. Meanwhile, outside the house, police cars screeched to a halt as officers rushed towards the front door, their weapons drawn and their faces set in grim determination. They had received a frantic call for help from Nina's friend, and they were not about to let another innocent life be claimed by the hands of a killer. As they burst into the house, their flashlights cutting through the darkness like beacons of hope, they were met with a scene of horror. The lifeless body of Nina lying in a pool of her own blood, her eyes staring blankly at the ceiling as if searching for answers in the stars. The officers combed the house for clues, their footsteps echoing through the empty rooms as they searched for any sign of the killer. But despite their best efforts, the perpetrator had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the chilling echo of their presence. As dawn broke over the horizon, casting its golden light upon the town, the residents emerged from their homes to find a scene of chaos unfolding before their eyes. News of Nina's tragic demise spread like wildfire, sending shockwaves through the tight-knit community. Amidst the chaos, Nina's friend stood in disbelief, her heart heavy with guilt and grief. If only she had been able to reach Nina sooner. If only she had been able to save her from the clutches of the killer. But now, all she could do was mourn the loss of her dear friend and pray for justice to be served. Weeks turned into months, and still, the killer remained at large, lurking in the shadows like a malevolent specter haunting the town. Despite the best efforts of the police, no arrests were made, no suspects identified. It was as if the killer had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only a trail of broken lives and shattered dreams. But amidst the darkness, a glimmer of hope emerged. A clue, a lead, a whisper of a name spoken in hushed tones among the townsfolk. With renewed determination, the police launched a full-scale investigation, combing through every shred of evidence in search of the truth. Days turned into weeks, and still, the killer remained elusive, taunting the authorities with their ability to evade capture at every turn. But just when it seemed as though all hope was lost, a breakthrough occurred. A witness came forward with crucial information that could finally bring the killer to justice. With this newfound lead, the police launched a series of raids, descending upon the town with a fury born of righteous anger. They combed every inch of the area, turning over every stone in search of their elusive quarry. And then, just when it seemed as though the trail had gone cold, a breakthrough occurred, a piece of evidence that linked the killer to the scene of the crime. With this vital clue in hand, the police launched a manhunt, their determination unyielding as they closed in on their target. But even as the net tightened around the killer, they remained one step ahead, slipping through the cracks like a shadow in the night. With each passing day, the tension in the town grew palpable, a thick fog of fear descending upon the residents like a suffocating blanket. No one felt safe, no place was secure, as whispers of the killer's presence circulated through the community like a whispered curse. Nina's death cast a long shadow over the town, leaving behind a legacy of grief and uncertainty. Every door was locked, every window barred, as the residents sought to protect themselves from the unseen menace that lurked in the shadows. And yet, despite their best efforts, the killer continued to elude capture, their identity shrouded in mystery, and their motives unknown. Was it revenge, jealousy, or something far more sinister that drove them to commit such heinous acts? As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the fear that gripped the town threatened to consume it whole. The streets grew empty, the once bustling shops and cafes now deserted as the residents retreated into their homes, seeking refuge from the ever-present threat of danger. But even in the safety of their own houses, the residents found no respite from the terror that gripped their town. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind rattling the windows sent shivers down their spines as they waited for the killer to strike again. Meanwhile, the police worked tirelessly to unravel the mystery of Nina's death, their investigation leading them down a twisting labyrinth of lies and deceit. Suspects were questioned, alibis scrutinized, but still, the killer remained elusive, a shadowy figure lurking just out of reach. As the months dragged on, hope began to wane, replaced by a sense of resignation, a grim acceptance of the fact that the killer may never be brought to justice. But even as the town mourned its losses, a glimmer of hope emerged, a breakthrough in the case that promised to finally unmask the killer's identity. With renewed determination, the police redoubled their efforts, poring over every piece of evidence with a fine-toothed comb. And then, just when it seemed as though the trail had gone cold, a breakthrough occurred. A single clue that would unravel the mystery and bring the killer to justice. Armed with this newfound information, the police launched a coordinated strike, raiding the suspect's hideout with a precision born of months of painstaking investigation. But as they stormed the building, they were met with an empty room, a chilling reminder of the killer's ability to vanish into thin air. Undeterred, the police pressed on, their determination unyielding as they followed the trail of breadcrumbs left behind by their elusive quarry. With each step forward, they grew closer to the truth, closer to bringing Nina's killer to justice. And then, just when it seemed as though the case was finally coming to a close, tragedy struck. The killer claiming another victim, their death a grim reminder of the danger that still lurked in the shadows. With the death toll rising and the town gripped by fear, the police knew that they could not afford to fail. Every resource was marshaled, every lead pursued with relentless determination as they closed in on their target. And finally, after months of tireless investigation, the killer was apprehended. A cold, calculating figure whose motives remained shrouded in darkness. As they were led away in handcuffs, their eyes burned with a fierce defiance, a final act of defiance in the face of their inevitable downfall. With the killer behind bars, the town breathed a collective sigh of relief, the weight of fear lifting from their shoulders like a heavy burden. But even as they celebrated their newfound freedom, they knew that the scars left behind by the killer's reign of terror would never fully heal. And so, as the sun set on the small town, casting long shadows across the streets, the residents gathered together to mourn the loss of those taken too soon. But amidst the grief and sorrow, there was also a glimmer of hope. A hope that, in time, the wounds inflicted by the killer's rampage would heal, and the town would once again know peace. As the years passed, the memory of Nina and the other victims faded into the annals of history, their names whispered only in hushed tones by those who remembered the horrors of that fateful time. But for those who had lived through the nightmare, the scars remained. A reminder of the fragility of life and the darkness that lurked just beyond the safety of their own front doors. And yet, amidst the darkness, there was also light. A light that shone bright in the hearts of those who refused to be cowed by fear, who stood tall in the face of adversity, and who vowed to never let the memory of those lost be forgotten. For in the end, it was not the darkness that prevailed, but the resilience and strength of the human spirit, a spirit that refused to be broken even in the darkest of times. And so, as the sun rose once more over the small town, casting its warm glow upon the streets, the residents emerged from their homes, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, secure in the knowledge that they would face them together. And as they walked hand in hand into the bright new day, they knew that no matter what trials and tribulations awaited them, they would always find strength in each other, a strength born of unity, courage, and the unwavering belief that, in the end, love would always triumph over darkness. And so, with their heads held high and their hearts filled with hope, they stepped forward into the unknown, ready to embrace whatever the future held, secure in the knowledge that they would never again have to face it alone. For in the end, it was not the killer who defined their town, but the resilience and courage of its people, a courage that would carry them through even the darkest of nights and into a future filled with promise and possibility.